Welcome to the How One MSP Fixed Project Management in Their PSA webinar. Today's presenter is Matt Fox. Please note that all lines are in listen-only mode. This means that after joining today's presentation, your line will automatically be muted. We welcome any questions at any time during today's presentation. Please enter your questions into the questions box in your webinar console. At the conclusion of today's event, our speaker will be holding a Q&A session. And with that, let's get started. Matt, take it away.
All right, thanks, Jordan. Yeah, my name is Matt. I want to thank you, everyone who's attending. We appreciate you coming here and learning about some project management stuff and listening to how we as an MSP fix some project management issues for ourselves. So if this is your first time with us, you may not know that TopLeft actually is a unit within a mature MSP. So we know what you're feeling like. If you're frustrated with your project management and whatnot, we know how that feels. And we are going to give you a framework today to deliver your projects on time and on budget with less stress with the team that you have today. And in fact, this is a good webinar to attend because we have a little extra bonus this time. I'm going to give you a little sneak peek into something that we're launching in our Kanban board product, something related to project management that we're launching in a couple of weeks. And you really want to wait till the end to see that. What I'll show you is we're really excited about that. First, a little tech check. I want you to find the questions section of the webinar, and if you don't mind, type in your name and the company that you're with and your region if you want, and let's see who is what companies and regions are represented here. So while you're doing that, I want to introduce myself a little more. TopLeft is a unit of Kirchhoff Technologies, or KTI. We're an MSP in the Vancouver, BC area since 2007. I'm heading up the Kanban division here. I've been with KTI and associated companies for about 10 years now, and I spent those last 10 years involved in a variety of agile project management contexts, like from software development, DevOps, some sales, some marketing, some customer success, and so on. And so we're going to be teaching what we've learned from a bit of study and a lot of practice here at KTI. So let me see who's joining here. We have William from Peak Solutions in Southern California. We have RPM Technologies in Indianapolis. Chuck Thompson, welcome. Tom Carey from Next Digital in Edmonton. Welcome, Tom. I've got Patrick McEwen from MIS Choice in the Midwest. Appreciate you joining. Joel Palmer in the South Central region. Joel Palmer Technology. We got Robert Martinez from there. Welcome. Roberto Wong from Atomic Technology in Irving. Jonathan from Lighthouse Business in Business Information Solutions in Albuquerque. Lyndon Will from Next Digital as well. Welcome. Love to see it when more than one person from one company attend. That's great. Bogdan from Bogdan Business Solutions with Integrity. From Toronto, welcome, and others as well. Kai from Senate Technologies in Atlanta, welcome. We really appreciate y'all letting me know who's attending. It's great that you're here. So let me tell you a little bit about our story. This is current staff of KTI right now. So we're up to about 20 to 25 folks or so. What led us to go out and build these Kanban boards? Well, we were not really too successful with project management at KTI. We had a lot of tickets started and not finished. We had like 400 open tickets with 10 technicians at the time. Our projects didn't move forward. We really didn't know what was close to being complete. We didn't know what was about to start. It took us a long time to close those project tickets, which resulted in our project customers feeling neglected, and everyone kind of a lack of teamwork. Everyone was kind of just siloed, working on their own little projects without a whole lot of teamwork. And all of this was despite the fact that we were using a major PSA. We were using ConnectWise, like a lot of you. So we had the tickets. They had enough data. They had a summary, they had description, time entries, and notes, and so on. But ConnectWise and the projects module were no help as far as managing that work. and we hear the same complaints from Autotask users too. So we knew of Kanban and agile techniques from some software development background that we had, and so we decided to try it with our MSP projects, and you know what, we found out it works. We've made major improvements, and now even though we're still busy, we feel under control, and we understand our own work, and our customers are happy. So we're going to teach you some of the key functions for a project manager in an MSP, the kind of the Kanban way to do these key things that need to happen to deliver your successful projects. And after that, only if you want, I'm going to show you the tools that we use and that we offer to others to make this really fast and really easy. And after that, we'll take some questions, anything about project management or about our Kanban tool. So you're welcome to go and type in your questions right now, and we'll get to those at the end. And this webinar will be recorded, and you can register in the same place that you registered to attend today. You can go back there and register to get the recording, or you can go to our blog and subscribe, and you'll find out when we post that in a few days, probably topleft.team/blog, and you'll see when it's posted there. So first of all, what is Kanban? Well, you may have only recently heard about it, but it's actually a set of older ideas. It came out of Toyota automobile manufacturing in the 40s. So it's actually quite old and well established. We just haven't tended to have heard about it in our industry until more recently. So it's a set of ideas that have to do with thinking about efficiency and reducing waste, and also representing work visually. And it's been widely adopted in software development. And now it's becoming known in many industries, IT and other industries. So this here is a very basic example of a Kanban board. So that has to do with the representing work visually part, which is the most well-known part of Kanban. And so basically you get the columns that, well, you think in terms of your workflows, like how does work flow through your organization? You know, when it's a new ticket to when it's a completed ticket. You think about the key stages in that workflow, and you get a column to represent each key stage, and then each unit of work is a card that goes in the column represented to represent what stage it's in, and you want to see these cards move from left to right. That's you know, really all there is to it. And so as far as introducing Kanban into new industries, there has been some news lately. This is one bit of older news. You may have heard of Trello. That's a very well-known Kanban app. They were acquired by Atlassian for 425 million. So this is big bucks going on here with Kanban stuff. Also, more recently, Asana. That's a project management tool you may have heard of. They have Kanban boards, and they are going public as of February, not too long ago. So Kanban is definitely becoming more broadly known, and including in the IT industry, which is what we are helping with. So what are the benefits of Kanban? Well, one is you get to see that work in progress. It even has its own abbreviation because it's such a key concept, WIP. We want to limit the work in progress, not work on too many things at a time, and you can do that once you can see that really clearly what particular work is in progress. Kanban is going to help you be more responsive, which really does come from limiting your work in progress. It's going to help you stop work from falling through the cracks and just forgetting about certain things, because you can highlight the sort of tickets that are beginning to get old, so that you understand that and work towards fixing those ones. You can improve the flow of work by identifying and addressing bottlenecks, especially bottlenecks that come from not having a lot of work go to one or two of your technicians. It's going to stop you feeling from feeling overwhelmed, both you and your team. It's really good at that one because it separates the responsibilities, and it's a great communications tool for helping everybody on your team be on the same page as far as, you know, what work is going on right now and what's coming up. And Kanban is something that you can adopt with small manageable changes. It's not something that you need to go and take a huge course on it and then adjust all of your workflows all at once. No, you can really add first you can add Kanban as a visualization tool to visualize what you're doing right now, and then use it to begin adopting some of the ideas or the framework that I'm going to show you right now. So what's this for? This webinar is for MSP project managers. So folks who need, real practical steps and not just concepts, because even if you've done some of your own investigation into Kanban, you may have found that a lot of the material is really conceptual, and so it might even leave you feeling like you know the ideas, but you don't know really what are the next steps to take to actually implement this in your MSP. And so that's what we're going to teach today. It's going to be about the basic steps that you take day by day and week by week to keep everybody happy, your clients, engineering team, sales, your boss, and yourself. So it's going to be good for, sort of on the scale of a team of 5 people working on 20 projects or 25 people working on 100 projects. Small to large MSPs and typical project sizes that MSPs do. Now, it is not going to be a complete methodology. You are going to still benefit from knowing about what other project management methodologies teach about quality and communications and risk management and so on. So we're certainly not going to be covering all that in an hour. So do your research about the whole scheme of things. But it's also not for 20 people working on a single project. Really large projects. You're going to need more structure for a project like that than we lay out today. But this is going to be really good for the sort of projects that MSPs typically do. So this is it. This is the cycle. This is kind of how the framework is laid out. It's something that you start out, you do a series of steps, and then you come back and you do them again. So the steps are first that you identify the projects, basically get an inventory of everything that your project team is doing. Within each project, you're going to break down the work so that you get a good list of tasks that you're going to complete in the next phase. Then you're going to estimate that work so you get an understanding of what you're looking at, in terms of hours or complexity. You're going to assign the work to the individual members because engineers need to know what they're supposed to work on. And as the team does their work, then you're going to monitor it and take action when things stop flowing. So the letters there, I, B, E, A, M, you can remember that real easily just by thinking about an I-beam. That's a key part of say a building, and it can be a key part of your project management workflow too, just as an easy way to remember. So let's go a little bit into, so as this is a cycle, let's talk about how frequently you actually do it. So there's basically 2 things that you can do. You can do kind of a Scrum idea. You may be familiar with that term. That's an agile methodology, and it calls for sprints that repeat over a series of sprints. It's just a period of time, frequently 1 to 2 weeks, and you do your project management and execution within a sprint. So you first you decide on which work you want to do. You go through that cycle. And then you do that work for a week or 2 weeks, whatever your sprint length is, and then you do it all over again. So you might choose Scrum for more predictability because you get to work in a fixed time period and repeat that over and over. Kanban is what you might do if you need a little bit more flexibility. So then you're just kind of doing things continually. You just you go through that cycle as you need to make sure that you have enough tickets that your engineers stay busy and your customers keep seeing work being done. So you might go through that little cycle. You might even do it every day or every couple of days as you're doing Kanban, just to kind of keep your pipelines filled up with work. So let's talk about some of the steps in the cycle. So first with identify projects. So a project is going to be anything driven primarily by you and not by the client. So, the client here is paying you to figure out what to do and what order to do it, versus things that are more driven by the customer, such as help desk work, where they know exactly what they want and they know when they want you to do it. So we're not talking about service and help desk stuff like that. So a project obviously is going to have multiple tasks. Likely you're going to have multiple engineers working on it. Hopefully you've got a clear scope and a schedule agreement with the client. So that's definitely the project stuff. You do want to include internal projects. For example, if you are migrating to a new RMM solution, that's going to be a big project for you. Basically anything that your project team is working on, you need to take stock of that and understand what your obligations are. Now, as far as using Kanban, I'll just first describe it in terms of really generic Kanban stuff. Even what you could do with sticky notes on a wall or on a whiteboard. how you can use Kanban to help you organize this work. So how would you use Kanban here? You're going to identify the projects and make a swim lane for each project. So a swim lane is just kind of a term for a horizontal lane. They're very useful for grouping the work that you're doing and basically understanding all of the projects. You can group your distinct work in different ways, such as by how it's assigned to your engineers. And I'll show you that later. But basically, when you start out, you're going to be grouping that by the project. And so just lay out some the names of the projects there in a horizontal lane on whatever you're working on a wall or whiteboard or whatever. So then that brings us right to the second point in the cycle where you break down the work. So this is basically where you make tickets and tasks for the project work. So you understand what are the distinct things that need to be done in order to complete this project. You are going to you're going to break down enough work for the next major phase or basically a milestone of the work in each project. And you're going to plan that whole milestone at a time. You're not going to do the whole thing because that's not very agile. You know, if this is a larger project and you expect it to go on for 3 months, you're not going to plan out every task for the next 3 months because that's just too much. You know, you may run out of money for that project when you're halfway through, and then half of that work is going to be wasted. So we're not going to do that because that's not agile. But we are going to do it for basically the next major phase or milestone, because that's a good way to not miss anything. When you kind of think in terms of what's the whole next segment of work that we need to do, thinking about it in those terms are going to help you just not miss anything, because that's one of the biggest risks here. You definitely don't want to miss anything. So who's going to do this? Well, it's going to be somebody who's familiar with the technical issues at a fairly detailed level. So basically an engineer, or if you are a technically minded project manager, then you can do it. But it definitely does need to be somebody who's got some experience in the technology. You as a PM, you're only responsible for making sure it gets done. You don't necessarily have to do this, but the main thing is that nothing gets missed, because that's the easiest way to make your project explode is to get the scope wrong and forget about entire things. At least that's been my experience. It's once you have a good list of everything that needs to be done, there's a bit of flexibility in, maybe you overestimate some things, maybe you underestimate other things, but that generally can work itself out. But if you just forget about entire things, that's an easy way to get some problems in your project. So that's what you're going to do for breaking it down. Now, I want to actually tell you what are the specific fields that you want to fill out in your PSA in ConnectWise or Autotask or whatever else you might be using. These are the fields that you are going to use as you make these project tickets or tasks. You're going to use the summary and title, obviously, the description or the list of tasks. Obviously, you're going to need that. You're going to set the due date only if there's a constraint imposed from outside. So we're not going to use the due date just for managing the work. I have met with some MSPs who do that, but we're not going to do that in this framework. So this is the due date is for as an example, like maybe this project is the result of a regulatory change that comes into effect on a certain date, or there's a conference that this project is related to. The conference is obviously starting on a fixed date. Maybe it's for an RFP that has a specific due date. So that's the case where you're going to use the due date, but it's not for just managing the priority of the work. Basically, think if we don't do this by the due date and somebody gets embarrassed because you missed something important, then that is probably a good time to use the due date. The priority, you can set that, but most everything right now should be the standard priority. You might use a higher priority at some other point if something really unexpected comes up and it's urgent, and you want that urgent thing to interrupt the other work that's happening right there or at that time, then you might want to use an elevated priority. You may also use a lower priority for things that are just kind of nice to have. maybe, things that you might do to improve that project if there's any sort of budget left over at the end. Now, that's the sort of thing that, in my experience, always happens in theory to other people. I've never had a project that has any budget left over at the end. Maybe you're like me and you think that's something that only happens to other project managers. But if there is something like that, then you might use a lower priority just to make that clear that these are nice to have things. And you might go and set any other fields that you're actually going to use. Like you might have a contact, type, subtype, or item, and categorization, stuff like that. Maybe the dependencies between the tickets. Go ahead and set those if you want, but only if you're actually going to use them. Because there's really no value in just kind of doing it for the sake of doing it, because it makes you feel like an expert project manager because someone told you to do that sometime. If you're not actually going to make use of that later, don't bother. You can always do that, set those fields later when you actually are going to have a use for that. Now, for things that you're not going to set the estimated start date. Now, you may have used that before in kind of a older project management method. Somebody may have told you to set that, but we're not going to do that because that's kind of known as push, which is something that we go, Kanban advocates against pushing work, from a project manager to an engineer saying, hey, you got to start this on a certain due date. It's not how it works in Kanban. The engineers are the ones that pull the work when they're ready for new work. So we're not going to set estimated start date. We're also not going to do duration. That's kind of the same thing. We are not at this time, like right now, we're not going to do budget or estimate, any sort of estimate or story points, because this comes later. And also we're not going to assign the tickets just yet to anybody because that comes later in the cycle. Now, I do want to say a bit about the ticket size because I've talked to a lot of MSPs who have some confusion about, or maybe not confusion, but just some uncertainty about, like, what's a good size for a ticket. So when you're making these tickets, you want to make sure, ideally, that a ticket is kind of a cohesive unit of value for the customer and it has minimal dependencies on other things. So it's something that can be added or removed or changed or whatever the nature of the ticket is, something that can be done for the client that really doesn't depend on much else. For example, say as well, it might depend on things being done before it, but it's kind of a smaller size. So as far as like, for example, a network upgrade project, you might have, you may have made a ticket that said like install the new office router, but that's too big. What we want we're looking more for things like, as far as the work goes to install that router, you want to have tickets that are something like order the office router, then configure it when it comes to your office, and then finally go to their site and replace that router. So those would be 3 different tickets, and those are kind of the more of the right size that we're looking for. So ideally, it can be done by a single technician in a single sitting. That's kind of the ideal here. I know that that's not always possible, but that's what we'd like to do. If you know in advance that the work is going to require a handoff between 2 people, then ideally you can split that up into 2 tickets that don't require any handoff. And as far as a handoff goes, I mean, one person doing the first part of the work and the second person doing the second part of the work. I'm not talking about if you have like a QA stage in your projects, which is a great thing to have. I'm not talking about the handoff between implementing that work and then handing it off to the QA stage. That's a standard thing that we do want to have, but ideally, as far as the actual implementation work goes, we could just have it related to what one engineer is going to do. So when in doubt, err on the side of 2 small tickets. I've certainly not seen too many MSPs that are tending towards tickets that are too small. The vast majority of MSPs are going to be tending towards tickets that are too large. So if you're in doubt, go to a smaller size, and at the most, it should be 2 days of work. You never want to have a project ticket that is going to take more than like 16 hours or so to do. The only exception is if it's really unprecedented and risky work, and the customer has an almost unlimited budget. If that's really the case, and like it's really experimental, then go ahead and say, we don't know how long this work is going to take. It could be a week, it could be 2 weeks, like who knows. But that's pretty rare, and so unless that's the case, stick to 2 days at the very most. And as far as making sure that things are clear, one of the most important things is that the description and the scope of this work needs to be really clear so that you and the engineers and the customers all have the exact same understanding of when this ticket is done. Because we don't want to see, an engineer assuming that there's actually like a lot more to this ticket than what you are thinking as a project manager, or certainly what the customer is thinking. Um, because that's wasted work. If you're doing more than the customer is expecting, then that's waste because the customer is not really experiencing the value of that work. And same thing, you certainly don't want to kind of think, misunderstand, and have the customer thinking that there's more work going to be done for a certain ticket and then the engineer does a less. Obviously, you don't want that. So we have fixed this by, we kind of had this joke a little bit, where we would say, is a ticket done? And then we say, yeah, it's done. We just need to do a little bit of testing, or something like that. So actually, the ticket is not done. And so we had kind of we would ask, is this done? Is it really, honestly, totally done? And so in order to avoid that sort of thing, we kind of just explicitly said, what is the done when? And we would just make checklists on these tasks. And maybe you use the actual checklist functionality of your PSA, or maybe you just put it as a point form in the description of the ticket. We've done that too. And so that's what we call that, the done when checklist. Probably between one item and up to 10 items. Probably you don't want more than 10 items on that. So that's what we've found works really well for getting clarity on the size and the scope of a ticket. So how are you going to use Kanban for this? Well, you're probably actually going to need more space than a sticky note is going to give you for the actual task, the full description of that. So you might need to keep that somewhere else, or just in your PSA. But the main thing is you're going to write one card per ticket or task, and then you're going to rank them for each ticket. You're going to keep them in the backlog column for now, but you're going to rank them. And so whatever is the most important ticket, whatever you're going to do first for this CRM implementation project, that's going to go here. And the second thing to do is going to go here, third, fourth, and fifth, and so on. And then within the email migration project that you're doing at the same time, this is the most important, then that, then that, and that. And so that's the order that the engineers are going to be working on them when we get to that stage in the project. You're also going to consider the dependencies here. So if the second ticket can't be done before the first ticket, well, then it definitely has to be in this order. It would be an error to put it in the other order. So the next stage in our I-beam cycle is to estimate the work. So you need to do this so that you can make educated decisions about how you prioritize it and how you assign it and when you expect that to be done. And so this is important. So you're going to just enter the budget, estimated hours, maybe story points as an educated guess about that's going to help you prioritize and assign that later. So the simplest way is to do it in just hours, but some people like to do it in story points. That's kind of a measure of complexity rather than the actual number of hours that it's going to take. So a complexity point is basically you just compare it against other tickets and say, a certain type of ticket maybe gets 10 story points, and something that's twice as complex is going to get 20 story points. And there's a lot that you can do with this. Agile, Scrum in particular, as a framework, has a lot to say about this, and not making it too complicated. A lot of people recommend that you just use, for example, a Fibonacci sequence for story points. So you don't have to worry about the difference between 11 and 12. You just do 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. 13 and so on. So you don't let it get too complex because the exact number isn't important here. The main benefit of story points is that it doesn't matter who is going to actually do this work because the complexity is the same no matter who does this. Whereas if you're using hours, then the person who does that work does affect the number of hours that you would estimate. So, a junior person is going to take more time to do a certain thing than a senior person. And so that can affect your estimate as far as the story points go, whereas, as far as the hours go, whereas story points aren't affected by that. But that might be kind of something that you might adopt later on. I wouldn't worry about this if that sounds kind of If that sounds like a new thing right now for you, don't worry about that. You can get into that sort of thing later. Just keep it simple and do the hours for now. Well, you only estimate the tickets that need to be done kind of soon, where you can define sort of soon for yourself. But roughly speaking, if you're doing the Scrum mode, then you'd want to have at least one future sprint's worth of work estimated so that you can kind of pick off the right amount of work for that sprint. With Kanban, then the only thing is that you just need to keep the queues from being empty. You don't want your engineers to come to work one day and say, okay, I don't have any tickets that have been estimated and prioritized here. So you need to kind of stay ahead of them as far as the engineers go to make sure that they stay busy. So that's how much work that you would need to estimate at any time. So who does this? Basically the same people who do the breakdown, somebody who could do the technical work. They must be familiar with the project and the technology. So the project manager doesn't need to do it, but you are responsible for making sure it gets done. But if the same people do it who do the breakdown stage, then you might be asking, why is this a different step than the breakdown stage? Why don't you just do it at the same time? Well, you could do it at the same time, but if you make it wait a little bit, then you're going to find that this stage it is delayed until the scope changes are likely done. Because you are going to have certain scope changes happening at the beginning, especially at the beginning of a project or a phase, and that can change the estimate of a work. So if you delay that estimation work until you know all the scope changes are done, then you're not going to waste any of that work because there's not going to be any changes anymore. Also, if you wait longer, then your prior work can inform those estimates. Like if you found that just all of your work that you're doing is taking twice as long as you thought because whatever reason, this is you're using a new version of your firewall software or something like that. It's your first time that you've done that. Then you can use that prior work to inform those estimates. If you find that a ticket you think it's going to take 2 days or more, then you break that ticket down further and estimate it again. So how are you going to use Kanban to make this easier? Well, you're going to write your hours or your story points on the cards. And then you're going to use the, that would be from the needs estimation column, because you've, for the work that you've decided needs to be done somewhat soon, in the next sprint or in the next Kanban cycle, you're going to pull those over from the backlog. You're going to keep them prioritized. So this is more important than that. You're going to do this one first. And you're going to indicate that these are something that you as a project manager or need to make sure gets estimated sometime soon. And then when you do that work, or whoever is doing that work, when it's done, you pull them over into the ready column with its estimate. And that indicates that this is actually ready for the next stage of your pipeline, which is the assign work part of the cycle. So this is the trigger, assigning this work is a trigger to make sure that this work actually gets done. So you're putting it into a queue where an engineer is actually going to start to work on it. And with this, what you need to consider is one of the biggest roadblocks to work going really smoothly is a bottleneck in your team. For example, you might have only one senior engineer who they need to be consulted on like half of your tickets. And that's going to lead to longer queues for certain types of work because half of your work has to go through this member. And that's a bottleneck, and that's really going to impact the efficiency that your team can work at and your overall velocity that you're going to be able to achieve. So we want to minimize that as much as possible because the more kind of uniformly you can assign work in your team, like any ticket can go to any person, then the fewer that's going to minimize those bottlenecks and allow you to reach a higher velocity. Now, it can be difficult to deal with that. It's just a reality that in certain teams, you're going to have a senior engineer or two, and there's going to be more work that needs to go to them. That's kind of hard to avoid, but you can avoid it by improving the training and sometimes certification in your team. Those are good ways to do that, and improving your documentation. So if you have certain customers or certain projects for certain customers that are kind of owned by an individual member, then if you have good expectations about having good documentation about those projects and customers, then you're going to be able to assign work for those projects and customers, assign that to other members, not just the person who initially did that project. But if there's good documentation, then anybody else can come along and take over some of that work. So training and documentation are good ways to deal with those bottlenecks. So which tickets are you going to assign? You're going to think about the approaching tasks and milestones and project due dates. Obviously, if something has a due date coming up, then that's definitely going to need to be assigned. And also just the overall project importance and size. So you're going to be looking at all the projects that you have ongoing right now, and in the next cycle, the next week or 2 weeks in the sprint, or the next whatever Kanban cycle you're using. What's the work that you need to get done to make sure that your team is meeting those obligations, especially considering any specific due dates that are coming up. So you're going to be assigning based on, you are going to have to think about those constraints that you, just because of real life, you do have in your team. Certain tickets, certain projects do need to go to a certain member, which is a bottleneck, but real life, you are going to have that sometimes. So you're going to think about any constraints about a technician and their experience, the certain clients, certain projects, and things like that. So you're going to know for each ticket, who do I have to assign this to, who's available to assign it to, I should say, the current load of those engineers. If something is more urgent, then you're going to need to assign it to somebody who has less work right now. And also you're going to need to think about the availability of your members. What other sort of non-project work are they doing? Are they going off on training sometime soon? Do they have some vacation or holidays coming up, and anything like that? So keep those things in mind as you assign the work to a member. So, I do want to mention that there is an advanced technique here. If you do have a team where you've done a lot of work as far as training and certification and documentation, such that you can basically assign almost any ticket to any member, then you don't actually have to do this step. Because then you can leave the work unassigned and you can just prioritize it as far as like the entire team goes, and you can just have a single queue of work for the entire team. And then when engineers are ready for new work, all they need to do is go to the top of the common queue for the team and take whatever's at the top of that queue, and then kind of claim that for themselves and work that tickets till it's done. And that is really a very effective and efficient way to work. But it does require a lot of work as far as making sure that anybody in your team can take any of these tickets. So it doesn't work for everybody, but it is kind of an ideal place where you could get to. We also do some webinars on service management, and we talk more about that technique in the service management webinars. So just if you haven't attended one of those yet, keep your eye open for those, because we do talk more about that sort of topic in the service management webinars. So how are you going to use Kanban for something like this? Well, you're going to, you're going to switch the swim lanes up. So you are going to have, keep a section where you do have the project swim lanes, but at this part of the workflow, you're going to switch them over. Now you're going to have swim lanes based on your engineers. And then you're going to take the work out of the ready column, where you have them arranged by the project swim lanes, and you're going to figure out who you're going to assign that to and just bring it over to the swim lane for that member. And they're going to still be there with their number of estimated hours or complexity points, and you're going to prioritize them. So for example, Terry now has a queue of work just for himself where this work is prioritized. So first he's going to work on that, then this one, that one, and so on. And the ordering of the tickets is based on your needs as far as your whole portfolio of project work. So whatever is, as far as these tickets go, whatever is the first one that's important for your projects as a whole is going to be listed first. Now after this, we get to the part of the cycle, which is actually the most common part of the cycle that you're in, the monitoring part, and where the engineers kind of become involved as well. So all the prior steps are setting up kind of what we want to do, and then this step is actually going ahead and doing it, and then finding out where things aren't happening as planned, and then making changes to make sure that things get back on track. And it's not a kind of a do once and then you're done sort of step. This is what you do anytime you're in the cycle and you're not doing one of the other steps. but it's not intended to take a lot of time. It should be pretty straightforward because you're trying to be efficient here, so we offer a efficient way to do the monitoring stuff. Here you're going to be managing by exception. You're not going to worry about the stuff that is going well. So we're going to first try to identify those tickets that have some sort of problem and then manage towards those ones to get them back on track. So what are you going to be looking for in this case? You're going to be looking at the due date versus the progress. So if something is due 2 weeks from now, then it's probably not a problem if it hasn't started yet. And it's great if it has started. But if it's due tomorrow and it hasn't started yet, then that's a bit of a problem. You need to get somebody working on that right away. You're going to be looking at the hours logged versus the budget because you want to know if something is an engineer has worked 50% longer on a ticket than the budget said, then you're going to want to know about that and figure out what to do. You're going to be looking at things that are a long time in any one of these Kanban columns. Now, when a ticket has been there a long time kind of depends on the column, because if I'll get to this in a moment, but there's going to, once the engineers start to work on it, then you're going to have columns for things like waiting or in progress or started, and you kind of have different thresholds for what is considered too long depending on which column it's in. You're also going to be looking at a long time without a time entry or a note. For example, something that says it's in progress, but it's been a week without a time entry. You're going to want to know about that because that's not really the sort of in progress that we want. And then you're going to be looking to identify the bottlenecks because those are things that are going to slow you down. Also things that are escalated. So you're going to need to have some sort of plan to handle work that gets escalated from one engineer up to a higher tier of work. Sometimes that's more, like depending on your MSP, you may not need a really complex workflow to handle escalated work, but the larger your MSP and the more people you have working on this team, on these teams, then the more structure you need for handling work getting escalated. So here's some ways that you can, when you identify some of these exception tickets, ways that you can resolve this. So one of the easiest ways sometimes to identify or to handle this work once you've identified it is to reassign certain tickets to other engineers, because one of the most common problems is that an engineer is too busy. They've got too much work, and that would be the bottleneck engineer, but you can fix that by reassigning certain work to a different engineer who's not quite as busy. So that's one of the most common ways that you can handle that. You kind of related is that if you do have an engineer who's super busy and they have a long queue of work, then you just need to stop assigning work to them for just temporarily, obviously not forever, but they need to be given a chance to work down that queue of work. So you want to slow down or totally suspend assigning new work to those members just temporarily until they have a chance to handle that. You may find that you can visualize work moving through your pipelines a little better if you find yourself in a situation where a ticket is halfway done. So if that ticket stays as it is, you can't say it's completed. But if you actually split that ticket up into 2 tickets, one for the part that's already done and then one for the part that's not yet done, then you can say that work, some of that work is totally complete, and other work can kind of go back into your queue where you estimate it and then assign it and so on. So you kind of reset that part that's not done yet. And that can be a good way to demonstrate to your customers that certain work is moving forward when they can see that tickets don't just wait around for a long time if you're too busy or for whatever reason. Also, sometimes you just need to cancel work entirely. So if the business case for a certain task is gone or the client, you're waiting on the client, sometimes you just need to cancel that. So here's how you're going to use Kanban for this. The engineers now kind of take over and they move these cards around. So when Terry starts on a ticket, then he moves it over into the started column. Nicole gets her own queue of work and she's going to move work into the started column. If you have a QA or some sort of a further steps out of that, like some sort of a acceptance stage, then you're going to have columns for that. And you may not have all of these columns. Not everybody needs to have that much structure, but if you do, then what you want to see is that work quickly goes into started, or some people call this in progress, and then it moves to the next stage and the next stage and so on. And so what the engineers are actually going to be doing here is they're going to prefer to work from the right side of the board, because this is the stuff that's more closer to being complete. So instead of just always picking, when they're wondering about what new work to do, instead of picking from here, they're actually, I mean, certainly they will, but they'll only do that once they've kind of looked at what's more towards the right side of the board, because this is the stuff that's closer to being complete. And you're gonna, if you work this stuff, then you can actually deliver that and get that done. And only when they don't have anything sort of over here on the right side of the board, then they go and look at the ready column and pick new work off here. And that's really how you minimize getting that work, getting a lot of work in progress, is by making sure that you work this way. Scheduled is a useful column too. So that has to do with work that we can't do it right now because we need to coordinate it with somebody else. So the most frequent reason is that you need to go on site to do some certain work. And so you tell the customer, hey, I'm coming on site at 5 o'clock to replace the router once everybody's gone home, something like that. So you do put that in the calendar. And then it just waits here. And the engineer is going to watch the calendar to know about that kind of work. And it can just wait here, because we know that when the engineer is looking for new work to do throughout the day, they don't need to really worry about the stuff in this column, because that's just going to be done when it gets to that time of day. And then waiting is a useful column to have too, because you're always going to have certain work that's waiting on somebody else outside of the team. Most common one is you're waiting for some more information from the customer, but it could also be, you're waiting on a vendor to do something, or waiting for some parts in the mail. So that we usually have a column for that as well, because that's a useful. It's useful to keep all of that work in one place too. So notice that we're not putting work into the engineers' calendars just for the sake of making sure that this work gets done. So you have the reason for putting work into the calendar is to take control of that from the engineers, and then to have some visibility into what's happening. But the Kanban board actually gives you that control and that visibility without doing all that work of saying exactly what time of day some work needs to get done. So that saves a lot of work compared to organizing work using the calendars. Like I said, if something does need to be coordinated with somebody else, then it can go into a scheduled column, but that's kind of a minority of the work. That doesn't happen all the time. And this is another topic that we go into deeper in the service delivery webinars. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Our I-beam cycle: identify, break down work, estimate work, and assign work, and then monitoring it. And you've seen how that works with Kanban. And we've already talked about the engineer's workflow. Now you might be saying to yourself, all right, I can kind of see the value of this and how this makes things flow better, but this is going to be a lot of work to manage with sticky notes on the wall. And you would be very right about that, because the PSAs, ConnectWise and Autotask and others, are really not very good at showing you information in this way and displaying things in an actionable way. If you're using your PSA, there's a lot of clicks around in the project, the project module. They don't have great visualizations of data to help you understand. They have the Gantt charts, but those require you to put in the estimated start date and duration and stuff like that. And they're really pushing work to the engineers, which, as I've discussed, does cause some problems. So we don't want to use Gantt stuff. One of the key things is that there's no ability to see the multiple projects at once. And there's no easy way to monitor the bottlenecks and the neglected work and things like that. So how about I show you what we can do with the TopLeft Kanban boards. And this is really key to what has helped us at Kirchhoff Technologies make improvements to our own project methodologies. So the TopLeft Kanban boards kind of give you the best of everything. So you get these Kanban boards visualizations, so you can see things, you can manage everything exactly like I've described. It's really easy. You can see multiple projects at once. I'll show you that in a moment, how you do those swim lanes. You can easily identify those bottlenecks, that neglected work, and especially you don't waste time entering data, because everything, we connect straight to your PSA, ConnectWise, or Autotask, and we just fetch that data. So it's the data that you already have. It's just showing that in the Kanban way. And so it doesn't require any sort of double entry. You can even make changes on the Kanban board, and those changes get pushed back to your PSA. So I'll explain more about that in a moment. And here it is. So here is an example of a Kanban board showing the project tickets. So like I said, we connect into your PSA to get that data. All we need is an API member, and we can go and fetch that and display a board like this, because this is the data that you already have. Unless you're one of the MSPs that I talk to from time to time who says, the project module in my PSA is just too bad, like is no value, so I can't use it yet. So maybe you're using a third-party project management module, or an entire third-party application, and then you're not getting the benefit of having that data unified in one system. But now you can begin to use that data in the module in your PSA, and then get the benefit of the unification, as far as your customers and your time entries and billing and invoices and configurations and projects and products and things like that. So yeah, data is synced between your PSA and here. If you make a change to a card in here, then we push that straight back to your PSA. The columns that you see here are totally configurable. You can have as many columns as you want with any names that you want. What we do is we map the ticket or task statuses to these columns. So that's how we know where a card, which represents a project, ticket, or task, how we know where it shows up on the board here is by looking at the status on that ticket or task, and then how you've mapped those statuses to the columns. So that's how this works here in Kanban, which makes it really, really flexible. It means that you don't need to have set your data up in any specific way in your PSA. We can work with almost any way that you've already set up your data. So it's very, very flexible. So you can actually drag and drop the cards here between the columns, just like exactly like I was explaining in how you might do it with sticky notes on a whiteboard. You can just drag and drop these here, and then we go and change that ticket status in your PSA. You can prioritize them up and down by dragging the tickets up and down, and then they'll stay where you put them. And you can use that as a project manager to indicate to your engineers, hey, these are the tickets or tasks that are the most important. Those are the ones at the top of the column. And the engineers will see that, and they'll work it in that order. And it's just easier to get to understand what's going on here, because you see the key data about the card, the summaries, the name of the projects, who's assigned to the ticket, time, when it was due, last time entries, and things like that. So all of this really key data that you need, either as a project manager or as an engineer, is available here in a really easy to understand way. So now this board isn't actually a great example. This is just the basics. So let me show you with the swim lanes, because this is what makes it really understandable. So here's an example of what we call the swim lanes, and now these are the project ones. So we have here the CRM implementation swim lane. So this is one project here, and you can see the exact tickets that are part of that project. Same thing with this. Here's another project, the email migration, a financial system implementation one. So this is what's going to allow you as a project manager to understand and manage multiple projects at once. And neither ConnectWise or Autotask has any sort of view like this one, where you can see the details of multiple projects at once. So this is kind of the key thing that those are missing, and one of the great benefits that Kanban can give you, because now you can see the details of multiple projects at once. So, in the identify stage, you're looking at the backlog column, making sure that everything, nothing is missing from there. Breakdown, you're going to make the project tickets and tasks show up in your PSA. Estimate, you can put the tickets here when they need estimates and then drag them to ready. Then you can assign them. You can see the little indicators about who's assigned there. And then you're going to monitor it as the engineers move them between ready, scheduled, waiting, started, and complete, and so on. You could also make a second Kanban board that actually has only backlog, needs estimation, and ready, and then that could be the one for you as a project manager to use. And then you wouldn't need to worry about, well, at least on that board where you're doing all that sort of planning stuff, you wouldn't need to worry about what's scheduled, waiting, and started. Basically, the things that are already in progress, then you wouldn't see those, and you wouldn't have that distraction on that Kanban board, because it's really flexible, and you can have any number of Kanban boards, even ones that you can even have these tickets showing up on the same tickets appearing on different Kanban boards that are based on what exact use cases you have. So let me show you the engineer swim lane. So here we get one lane for each engineer. So in fact, the first swim lane here is tickets that aren't assigned to anybody. So this is really key, and can show you, you can work out of the backlog here, needs estimation, and then ready. And then you can, when you are in the ready phase, of the cycle, then you can just actually drag these tickets down to who you want to assign it to and drop it in the right position there in the column, and it will just stay there, and it will automatically assign the member, and do that even in your PSA, so that you see the same thing when you are looking at that data in your PSA. Really easy. This also works great for daily huddles. So agile teams tend to have those little meetings every morning where you just kind of update on how things are going. So this is one that's great for using in that sort of meeting, because you just really quickly go through your engineers one by one, and they can report on what tickets they've started, what's waiting, if they need help on any particular ticket from anybody, or report on why a ticket has some red on it if it's sat there for too long or something. So it can make those meetings really, really efficient. So you can also filter it a little bit differently. This is an example of a project swim lane board, but now we're actually filtering it to only show tickets that are assigned to one member. So this is really useful for a project engineer to be able to see all of the tickets that he or she are assigned to, and everything else that they're not assigned to is eliminated from the board. They won't even see it and be distracted by it, but they can still see it based on what projects that they're working on. So it can really help them understand what their responsibilities are right now. Same thing with this. This is a little different. Now this is the member swim lane, but we're filtering it to just show a single project. So now you can answer the question, like in terms of a specific project that I'm focusing on right now, maybe because you're meeting with the client about it. You can see, who's responsible for each, well, in terms of my engineers, who's working on what and what stages of the work are those things at. So it can answer questions like that really easily, which are a lot of work to get if you're just if all you have is ConnectWise or Autotask. It's hard to answer questions like that. So it also helps you identify the neglected work by automatically highlighting it. Like this example here, where a ticket has been in the in progress started column, which is mapped to the in progress status. It's been there for too long. We've set a threshold maybe that says it's been, we don't want to see those there for more than 3 days. So this ticket's been there for 5 days, so it's highlighting it automatically, and you know that you need to go and figure out, okay, why isn't that moving forward? Let's fix this. You can see also highlighting tickets based on the due date, so you can get an indicator there about what tickets have due dates coming up, and if they're not started yet, then you probably need to do something with that and make those move forward. Now, here is the bonus that I said I was going to show you. This is the new stuff that we have coming up, the project boards. Now, I haven't said anything in this regard yet about how you might use this, but this has been one of the most frequently asked for things as far as our software goes, is showing the status of individual projects, because I know that some of you have a lot of projects and it's too much to keep track of in just in your head, and the PSA software is no good at reporting on things like this. So here is an example where our columns represent the project statuses, and these cards don't represent project tickets or tasks. These are actually representing entire projects. And so we can see these as they go through our whatever we have for an overall project workflow, where they go from maybe ready or whatever this might mean for you. We can, as I said, it's all configurable, so you can set up a board that really works for you and represents what you're doing, where you have a project that hasn't yet started. Then you have projects that are, as far as the entire project goes, they're in progress. And then maybe you have a kind of a monitoring stage where you're all done, but we're still kind of watching to make sure that that overall was a success for the customer. And finally, they go to closed. So this is really useful for any sort of MSP that has, maybe 15 to 20 projects or more. And I know a lot of you have a lot more than 15 to 20 projects, but it's really impossible to keep track of that sort of thing in your head, even when you're at 15 or 20. So this would really be helpful. And we're going to be launching this well, we'll be ready to take beta users probably next week, I think, and then launch that for everybody maybe 2 weeks after that. So it's coming pretty quick here. And if you're already a customer of TopLeft, then and you'd like us to let you know when it's available for you to use, even if it's even while we consider it beta, then let us know, and we will definitely tell you how to use that. So this also lets you improve efficiency. So we're kind of at time now, so I know some of you need to leave, so I'll just zoom through the rest of this. Kanban is going to reduce the clicks for you because everything's right in front of you, and so you don't need to click around in your PSA software anymore. It's going to show project and service work together, at least for ConnectWise now. Autotask not yet available, but we do want to do it in the future. It's going to avoid miscommunication because everybody sees the same data. You can assign and unassign members straight from Kanban. You can dispatch to the calendar if you need to. You can view and you can enter time and notes. So this is what's going to help engineers actually do that, enter their time and notes throughout the day because they can do it straight from Kanban. You can, at least for ConnectWise, you can customize the card appearance, and that's coming in the future for Autotask. So you can give cards, like for example, a certain background color if they have a certain status or a certain company. And you can manage your sales opportunities, again, just for ConnectWise, but coming in the future for Autotask, and activities. You can also have boards that show you your activities, which is a ConnectWise only thing. So here's something that an existing customer, a project manager out of Austin, Texas, has said how TopLeft Kanban boards helped her project management. They turned it from staring at huge lists, impossible stuff to prioritize, and made it easily digestible, very visually compelling. She was no longer looking at a mountain of data and wondering how to break it up. It's already broken up for us by Kanban. And here's a really big one: made the flow of tickets a lot easier to see. So you're no longer wondering what work is going on right now. And again, the big thing where she wasn't able to see projects side by side before, now they can see it all together. So if that looks like something that would really help you, get in touch with us here, topleft.team/schedule a call. That will help us get in touch with you. Well, that will let you put something into our calendar, choose a good time that works for you. We'll have a chat. We'll show you exactly what you want to see, answer all your questions about Kanban and how that works with your ConnectWise or your Autotask. And yeah, we can move on to the next step and make that all available to you. Now, if you go ahead and you sign up by July 14th, then we have a bit of an extra thing for you. We want to give you 10% off an annual plan if you sign up by July 14th with this promo code. And that will actually get you about 30% off the regular monthly cost, because the annual plan is already cheaper, and then an additional 10% gets you a pretty big savings off of the monthly price. And we'll also send you a copy of the Phoenix project. You may have heard of that. That's really well known in the MSP industry. It talks a lot about various practices you can use to improve your workflows, or a copy of Making Work Visible, which talks about Kanban in an IT sort of environment. So that would be our way to say thank you for spending time with us today. We really appreciate that, and hope to see you soon. Now we have a Q&A session. So let me just take a moment and I'll review what questions we've got already. If you haven't yet put your questions in the questions section, then go ahead and do that now. Okay, we got a couple of you saying you want to be involved in the project beta. Okay, appreciate that. We'll definitely get you, let you know when that's available. Again, I expect that would be sometime next week. So someone has a question about, can we incorporate Microsoft Project into the presented solution? I have multiple files with previous projects, but I like the visualization showed by the top left. Can I use both together? And how would I do that? We don't have any project integration right now, and that's mostly because at the moment we've really been focusing on integrating with our key customer industry, which is our own industry, which is MSPs. And so because a lot of them are using ConnectWise and Autotask, and obviously they have the project modules, which work fine for collecting the data, but really not very good for visualizing it and helping you manage it in the way that you need to manage it. So that's why we've focused on that. And we really, at the moment, we don't have any integration with Microsoft Project. And so we don't have plans to do that specific bit either, but I do want to mention that we do we do have some interesting things kind of in the back of our minds about making project management stuff better in the future. Even things, well, some of them are just kind of ideas right now, but things like helping you kind of automatically understand your capacity and just automatically calculate, with the projects as they're laid out right now and the resources that we have, automatically help you figure out, okay, when is it reasonable to start on a new project, so that we don't have too much going on at once. And this is something that, as a project manager, would really make you a star in your team, because that's a key thing that your executives and your sales folks frequently want to know. I mean, I imagine that a lot of you have had that experience of a salesman saying, hey, project manager, I can sell such and such a project, but when should I tell the customer that I can start it? And then, if all you've had is the ConnectWise and the Autotask tools so far, then that means that you have to do a lot of work to figure that out. But we would like to make that better. So that's something that is kind of in the back of our minds for things that we can do. As far as integrating with other things, I don't know that we'll have to see. But at the moment, we do plan to continue focusing on Autotask and ConnectWise. Another question that we typically get is how to handle multiple people updating a status on a ticket. So I've heard that before, and our suggestion would be that you don't handle that. That is a symptom of having too big of a project ticket. So actually that comes back to how I recommended that an ideal ticket can be done by a single engineer in a single sitting, which is, I mean, I understand that's kind of an ideal, and you might not be able to regularly do that, but that's what you'd like to work towards. And that actually totally eliminates the problem of multiple people updating a status on a ticket. Because obviously, if you only have one person assigned to a ticket, then that's they know exactly who's responsible for setting the status on that ticket. So that kind of makes that project, that problem go away. Another question that we sometimes get is, how can customers use the boards? Because people observe that it would be really nice to be able to offer a view like this, like a Kanban view, to your customers. So that's something that we don't support at the moment, but it's definitely in our roadmap. We want to get you a better solution for this, so that you can offer, you even offer your own customers their own login to Kanban, so that they can go and check on the status of everything themselves. And obviously we take care of the permissions for that, so that they would only see their own company's tickets, or handle the obvious stuff like that, so that they're not seeing things that they shouldn't see in your system. But that could be really powerful and make communication even better. Kanban right now is a great communications tool between you and your team, but Kanban can also be a terrific way to communicate between you and your customers. And so we definitely do want to make that available in the future. Great. I think that about wraps it up. It's been haven't seen new questions come in a little bit, so I think that will wrap it up. Wanted to say thanks again for attending, and Jordan, over to you.
Thank you, Matt. An excellent presentation. To all of you, thank you for attending today's webinar. For those of you whose questions were not addressed, a member of the team will be reaching out to you personally. Thank you and have a great day. That does conclude today's webinar event.